Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. We're back in part 4, talking the times, events, people, and history in Creigh Kelley's life. The farcical thing that happened with me, Marion Jones was long jumping,
Oh, I interviewed her.
right?
Yeah.
During the qualifying, it's on the far side of the track,
Yep.
the runway. So I said, I got to go over there. And all I had with me was my underwater wind up camera.
Oh my
I'd
gosh.
just been diving on the Great Barrier Reef for a couple weeks. So I came in and I get into there and it's packed with the photographers because the main media is at the finish line.
Right.
And I go to these guys, I said, hey, I had a photographer's vest on. And I said, I just want to get a couple pictures of Marion during the prelims. Is that all right? And so the press corps, they know each other. They don't know who I am. They're like, let this guy through. They let me down to the rail and
Unbelievable.
I pull out this little wind up camera. I snapped my picture, said, thanks, guys. They looked at me with their 7 pounds each
Yeah. Long
filters and extensions on, and they just start going,
Yeah. That's great.
so wish we should carry that. And I said, I won't be back. Thank you. And I got out of there.
That was just the best. Look, you get one life to live and you better live it as large as you can. You don't want to do any harm, do no harm. There've been some tight squeezes I've been in, which I will not discuss there, which I came out okay, but oh my God, my life would have changed immeasurably in a negative way had those things turned out a different way. But I can usually talk my way out of almost anything. But Sydney was remarkable. I interviewed her afterwards. I interviewed so many different people. I had to, as part of my job. I crashed a few parties that were awesome. Credentials would get you almost anywhere.
I got the Australian bronze medal field hockey around my neck at their party.
Oh my God. Really?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
They didn't expect to get a medal. So they have a party. I don't know how we got in. Got me and my buddy into that party. And yeah, I just said, what? Look, I'm going to look at the number in your chest. Can I wear your medal? He said, yeah, just find me later.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That is great. You know what? I think the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s were just the best 3 decades ever. The 90s were much more troubling as you got later on, just how dysfunctional the governing bodies were. It's just a tragedy. I actually had a meeting, I think it was in Reno, Nevada at the USA Track and Field Convention. And I had negotiated that Roadrunners Clubs of America, RRCA, USA Track and Field, Running USA, which I was a founding member of, would all get together in one room. I said, I have this grand idea, but I think instead of you fighting amongst yourselves, we could be bigger than that. And I came up with this strategy of an overarching model that they would all be a part of. They would keep their identities, but sponsors could come in and buy long distance running. If they wanted youth athletics, that would be proportionally to RRCA. If it was track and field, it would probably go to USA Track and Field. If it was pure road running, but so AT&T could come in and they pay $1 million and they get the money spread in these various ways. They didn't have the vision. And had they done that, I can venture to say, Seb Coe now sees it with World Athletics, how he's and broadened the bubble. Certainly Formula One did it. There's a lot of things we could learn from those models, but we fail all the time in long distance running because we're too parochial in our interest. In my opinion, that's just my opinion. But man, those were fun times. I tell people all the time, I'm sure you say the same thing. The times that I was running that were, as far as I was concerned, marginal times as a recreation athlete would win 95% of all the road races in America today that don't have prize money. They would win them outright, just crazy, insane. And it just stuns me that, but on the other side of the coin, in the early 80s, we brought women into the sport. That grew the bubble. We brought race walking and then walking into the sport. That grew the bubble. We brought charities into the sport. That grew the bubble. All of us that have been nurtured and made careers in the sport have done it because of those added texture to the sport. And people say, I can't believe you gave women only a few awards and the men most of them because there weren't that many women running, but you didn't let them run. So why would they want to? And so I said, I don't own that. I said, because we were the tip of the spear that said that we will include. And and we did. Most of those major changes happened under our watch as younger leaders. And I'm forever grateful because we were able to do that. The downside is there's not the interest in the tip of the spear anymore, at least in our country. When I go to Kenya every year since 2003, and there was another funny anecdotal thing. I only went there because I figured that pixie dust would rub off on me and I'd get faster again. That didn't happen, but I fell in love with the country. And my good friend, Peter Tanui, I introduce him as my brother to everybody. He was a very good collegiate runner, 18-time NAIA All American. And he got good, but he never got great, like a 104 half marathoner. We became dear friends and have been ever since. I went over and he was my minder, and I got a chance to see and meet all these great people. Ibrahim Hussein was one of them who's still deeply involved in their athletics. I met extraordinary people in very ordinary places, very rural, very agrarian, very not rich. But because he made me go to see his primary school, where he was the first kid to graduate from this primary school who went on to an American college and graduated. So he's a big deal there. Now, there have been others that have since, but there's 400 or 500 kids in this very rural school. I go and the kids are just fascinated to see this Mzungu white guy and come up and touch you and run away and so on. And it was a fascinating experience. As the headmaster was showing me around, I saw something that looked like a little roughed out garden. I said, "Is that your garden?" He said, "No, someday God will give us a library." I said, "Where's your library?" And it was like a little of old British books. It was tragic to see. And we walked on and I saw these women around a fire. And I said, "Is that where they burn the garbage?" And he said, "No, they're cooking the children's ugali for lunch." And I turned to, this is when you go, maybe I was a ready fire aim, not a ready aim fire. I said, "Peter, we should just start a nonprofit foundation and build a library and a kitchen." Suddenly, Mr. Kelley is going to build a library and a kitchen. I felt morally obligated. So I came back to America. We had formed our 501(c)(3), and we certainly built a library and a kitchen. We have no staff. We just have a bank account where we raise money at these parties, and then we build stuff. And we've been doing it for 20 years. And it's wonderful. And that's why I'm going back there. That's why we're going to go back there and get married, because it's the village. I know everybody. The person that insisted that we had to get married there in June of 2021, I went back and there's Paris Chepticher and her husband, Davis Nagano, and go to the same little church, this rural church that Peter and his family go to, that I go to whenever I'm there. And we became friends because he and Peter, her husband and Peter, are very good friends. So they insisted I come to lunch. And when she set the world record, we had to be guests at this big party at their place when she came home. And it was almost embarrassing. They want you to speak. My God, what am I doing speaking here? They have the governor speaking and the village chief and everybody else, not me, but I had to speak. And then later, I was going to lunch with them after church in June of 21. No, two. So Paris and Davis say, "You're going to get married. You're going to get married here." I said, "No, I can't. No, no, you must get married here. And we're going to be in charge of your wedding," kind of thing. I came back and told Renee, because she wasn't with me, how about we get married in Kenya? It won't cost us anything other than the trip that we always go on. And she said, sure. Hereby you're invited. You have to pay your
Oh,
own way, take care of your own expenses, but you're invited. And how did I know that Paris was going to win? That may have been, I don't know if it must have been June 2021. And maybe that's when it was. Anyway, Paris went on to win the Olympics, New York, and then Boston. That's the biggest trifecta I've ever seen. And she's going to be running New York. I hope she does well. But anyway, the point is, I meet these people in a human experience, not in a running experience. I've never been at a race with Paris, but I've been to her house 8 times as their guest. So it's just circumstance and it's wonderful. When I went there in 2010, maybe, there's what they call a Discovery Half Marathon. And the Discovery Half Marathon is in Eldoret, not far from Capsabet, where we are. All these runners come to be discovered. The slowest time is probably 105. This is at altitude. So I'm just a spectator. Here comes this entourage of Mercedes and things, and all these officials are getting out. And there's Paul, great marathoner. Anyway, they're all coming up. So he says hi to me, but I'm on the side of the fence and he's over there. And then this guy walks up and it's Ibrahim Hussein, but he's big. I didn't recognize it. You don't recognize me, Creigh. Everybody stops. When he stops, I mean, he's in charge of athletics. And I said, Ibrahim? And he goes, yeah. He said, you must come into the VIP area. I said, I'm back here and I'm with Peter. He can come too. So we walk over and they won't let Peter in. And I said, I'm not going in, but I'm Ibrahim's guest. And Ibrahim says, let him through at the bat. So we go in and we sit down and there's Rono. Henry Rono's this iconic guy. And I'm a guest. The race hadn't started yet. And Ibrahim says, I want to introduce you to all these people. And the head of athletics, all of athletics is there for Kenya. Ibrahim's there, others are there, and Henry Rono, a guest of honor. Henry and I had met under less than perfect conditions. I was an agent. I still had my running store in the early 80s. Henry had been a guest of somebody and came to the store, and he had not been behaving well in his life. Let me just put it that way. And he said, I want you to be my agent. And I knew what he had been doing with his life. And I said, I respectfully decline, but I am in great admiration of you. And we remained friends, albeit I turned him down. Here we are many years later. And Ibrahim switches into Swahili to tell everybody, not Kalenjin, although that was his tribal language, and tells everybody the story. Now they're all looking at me. I am and at the end, they all turned and did a round of applause for me. I have no idea what's going on. I turned to Peter and I said, what happened? He said, Ibrahim told a story that in 1980, let's make this up, 87, he wanted to run a race in Australia, but they didn't think he was worthy of going. And his agent wouldn't try to get him into the race. So he called you because he knew you were an agent and knew people. I'm sorry, maybe New Zealand, and you knew people. But it might have been Australia. Anyway, because I knew Rob DiCostello was one of my roommates at the Wheeling distance class, road race years before. And so whomever, I called Australia, long distance call. And he said, and you got him into the race. He won the race and he wanted to give you 10%. And you turned it down because you weren't his agent. You said it would be unethical for me to take the money, but I'm glad you won. He said, then I see Creigh at the Boston Marathon. And I think he won there twice. And this was the second time when I was invited athlete kind of thing. And I'm in the church and Ibrahim comes up to me and said, I need good luck today. Will you pin my number on? I went, Sure. And so he said, and I won the race and he pinned my number on, and that was good luck. He told the story. And the point was, white people historically had just taken advantage and taken money from the African athletes. But I was the total antithesis of that. I was just their friend. And Peter said, you'll never want for anything in this country anymore. So whenever I needed a favor for something, I got it. Amazing stuff like that. And I try to do good. That's what I always say. And you tell me how many distance runners that are bad people. I'm talking about at all levels, bad people.
Yeah.
I can name almost none. I can name
Yeah.
a couple, but almost none. And we self-select as whenever I go to a gathering or a party, I gravitate naturally to distance runners of all ages, speeds, talent, everything. This afternoon, I'm going to Peter Tanui's daughter's. They have a middle school. She's in seventh grade. They have a track meet. And is it middle school? I think it is. I don't know what she's running, maybe the mile. I don't know whatever she's running, but I'm going to their track meet. I love those people. I love that camaraderie. They don't know who I am. They could care less. I'm just a spectator. And I thrive in that environment. I hazard to say anybody you've ever talked to on this podcast feels exactly the same way,
Yeah.
precisely the same way.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job of explaining it and bringing it out from your essence. That's very cool. And I think, yeah, everybody's going to relate to that.
No, I'm still announcing probably 50% less than I was. I do think that we get aged out, and I think we're smart to age ourselves out before we get aged out. And I still do the ones that I really like doing, like Quad Cities. It's a great marathon, great event. Joe Marino, great race director, some of those rock solid people. And I told almost now 2 years ago, I told the CEO of the Denver Colfax Marathon weekend, which I helped create back in 2004. And we had our first race in 2006. I said, 2024, I'm closing the door on being the race director. She said, no, you can hang on, be a consultant. I said, no, you could announce. I said, I don't want to. I just, no. And maybe I'll change my mind about the announcing, but right now it's time for younger people to come forward. And I said, that's extremely important for our sport to be nurtured. Don't keep these people from growing into the sport. Let them make our mistakes. Let them learn. Let them make it even better than it was. It doesn't mean I'm going to stop running. I'll probably run more. It doesn't mean I won't. If somebody calls up as a young race director and said, how do you manage this? How should you do this? I've, I have people that will say, he was my mentor. He got me, helped me get started. And I won't tell you these people's name. They're incredibly successful today. I had no part in that, although they insist I was a mentor. I don't remember any of that. I just, I just share information. I think it's important. We need to nurture the sport, keep it healthy, keep it going forward, strong.
You certainly know that you've made the contribution. I think over time, the many.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.
I want to ask you about a couple other people to
Sure.
see your commentary on. And we'll cut this if it doesn't work out right. Sam Bear getting 5-year suspension. Do you know
That
that
was
story?
weird. I don't know why he got suspended. I can't remember why. Probably because of the professional circuit.
He was on the professional circuit. Then after he ran maybe Charleston,
Oh yeah,
500 bucks,
yeah.
got published in the Pittsburgh newspaper, and the AAU
Oh yeah.
made a case out of him.
Yeah, I didn't know Sam personally. Of course, I had incredible respect for him, but I knew how it all worked because before we created the TAC Trust, thanks to Steve Bosley, and Shorter had something to do with it, but it was mostly Steve Bosley, president of the Bank of Boulder, and Alvin Chris from, at that time, the Athletics Congress. Those two with some help from others, including Frank, but they crafted that so that if an athlete made money, appearance money or prize money, it was pushed through the tax trust and then they could draw on it for living expenses. Man, that's how Uda Pipping bought her house after I helped with all of my athletes. But before that, I was doing under the table money, appearance fees. The great thing about having an agency, BKB Limited, a company, the money was paid to us. And then we wrote the checks to the athletes. So if they say, did they pay you when you ran Bloom State? No, I just ran. It was great because I paid them. It was all smoke and mirrors. And I thought it was incredibly wrong. People are all upset about what is it, image and likeness and so on for
Yeah.
American
NIL,
sport.
yeah.
Yeah, NIL. I think it's absolutely right. And I think we were in the same position in the early 80s when all this went down. Sam Baer, unfortunately, but you can go back way back to Jim Thorpe. What a criminal conspiracy that was against him. As I was building my running store, I was paying athletes under the table to run my races. It wasn't a lot, but $250 here, $500 there. They loved every minute of it. We figured it out how to have our athletes make a living. And I can remember John Sinclair never made an Olympic team, but he did everything else. And I remember telling him, I said, don't spend this money. Real estate, buy land, the great song, Buy Dirt. But I said, you don't know how long your career is going to last. Now, it lasted a long time. But I said, you don't need to be extravagant, but you want to have a life after running. And he has. His wife, Kim Jones, who is one of the best American marathoners of all time, running in the mid 20s back 35 years ago, 40 years ago. She never was on the Olympic team and was always the runner up, a lot of times to druggies, which was unfortunate. Same thing with Shorter. He should have had the gold in Montreal. There's no question that that was a criminal. And Don Cardonk should have had the bronze. That was just criminal. I have a very difficult time. I do not condone the use of drugs. I think it's really tragic. I pray every day that my friends don't fall victim to the enticement of it. I don't think they ever will. You have to think about it. When you're coming from nothing and you can help not just your house, your village will be helped as well. It's anyway, digressing, but Sam Baer, wrong place, wrong time. And it was unfortunate that that happened to him. But again, you can go right back to Jim Thorpe in a story.
What about a quick comment about Marion Jones? That was while she was married
I
to
was
the shot putter, and
I,
she was very denying that she would ever do it.
there's no difference between that and Uda Pipping. As far as I was concerned, Uda never did drugs, but obviously was proved wrong and was all about Dieter Hogan, her coach, I guess now her husband, but maybe, I don't know. But I felt that was so sad. Marion Jones interviewed her at the Olympics, loved her. Just what a story, what a personality. She was great. And it wasn't long after when she was busted. And it was all because of her husband. She was dirty. That's just Ben Johnson. He was dirty. And you wish the story was different. I was on the very early in the 80s, on the very early drug testing. How was it called? But it was a committee in USA Track and Field. And I was part of that committee. And I preached to all of my athletes, and none of them. I had dropped Uda Pippig a couple of years before she was caught. I don't know whether she was on drugs back then or not. She certainly denied it. I don't know the story. I adored her. She was just a wonderful person. But Dieter Hogan wasn't. He was evil. And Marion Jones' husband, he was evil.
What about that committee? What was their basis and reality of we're going to catch people, we know what's going on? How naive or informed were they of the reality?
First of all, very naive because the science was way ahead. There's a thing on Netflix or Paramount, the Balco. They were way ahead in the science. It took a long time for the athletic groups to catch up. Kenya has been on tenterhooks for getting kicked out. Russia definitely was state supported stuff. Now Kenya is real serious about it because their whole investment in athletics, that is the number one sport for the country. They can't afford to be kicked out. So they're as hard on the agents and the athletes as they can possibly be. Look what happened to Tour de France. That's why the out of competition testing is so important. And the federations, World Athletics, keenly interested. The trouble is you have a second tier of athletes that are not being tested. So you see a flood of subprime Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes that come to America, get visas, and they run in these lower grade road races and they make money. They'll come in and just suck away that prize money. And their initial reaction, which I was supportive of, was to have American prize money only. But that didn't sit well with a liberal progressive atmosphere. But the intent was we were pretty confident the Americans won't be doing drugs at the level that these other athletes were. I believe that's still true.
That's interesting.
Just my opinion,
Yeah.
but and opinions are like anything else, but they're free.
Yeah, but it's interesting to get yours. You certainly had a good look and a long time thinking about all
And
that.
I was angry about it. I wanted athletes to be tested. That was the most important thing from back from the days of DMSO. We really wanted athletes to be clean. They think that Salazar was the big story. But hell, I knew about Athletics West, the early Nike team. And I knew people that were in the locker room that knew undeniably that these guys were doing drugs. And Salazar was all part of that, but you couldn't catch him because it was Nike. It was Athletics West.
And he was one of those boulder rats, wasn't he?
No, he wasn't. No, he was Boston. Yeah.
He was out of some of the Boulder guys have stories about him. They didn't like him either.
Oh, no, because he would win on drugs.
Yeah.
And that was one of the great things about Australia when Rob DiCostello became decades later the head of athletics for Australia. That was great because there was a legit athlete that did legit things and would keep them clean. It's an imperfect world. People have to live with themselves, but anybody wonders why Anthony Sandoval, this now famous cardiologist, why he was part of Athletics West, but he would never go to Oregon to train. Never. There's a reason. Yeah, he stayed clean. He was an honest, clean guy. And he proved that you can be the best in the world without it. And just interesting stuff. But as John Sinclair said to me years later, it'll all come out someday. He said, it will all come out someday. It may take a long time for Salazar to get caught, but he'll get caught. And he said, I know, and many athletes know, they can live with themselves decades later and feel good about their performances. And they know who was dirty and who was clean. It's interesting stuff.
Amazing stories.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about one more guy. Again, this is one of my not to go in. How familiar are you with the other Fidipides clubs around the country? Do you know the one in LA, Don Feinstein? Is any of that?
Don. Oh my God.
Don Feinstein's a hasher.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, I knew these guys at one time, the different guys that owned Fidipides. There were a lot of stores around the country. Bob Day owned one for a while.
oh, wow.
And it's not like today where you just email, FaceTime.
Yeah. Yeah.
We really didn't do a lot of that kind of, you're making me think of Bob Hensley back in the Northeast. He was a great runner. And I'm just thinking about some of these people from the late 70s that were embedded in running. I met John Hughes on a run in Winter Park, Florida one day. It was like I'd just gotten back. I don't know where I'd been, but it was in the 70s. My wife at the time, her father was a retired Navy captain living in Winter Park, Florida. And I was out on a run and here come these guys running. And I said, can I join you guys? And they said, sure. And that's how I met him. And then later on, I saw him at an athletic Congress thing and we just became fast friends for years. And he's the one that brought me into the Walt Disney World Marathon in the 90s, he and I were trying to get a world championship half marathon to be on at Disney World, and they wouldn't go for it. But he kept persisting to see if they could put on a marathon. And eventually he got them to approve it. And I said, well, I want to be your announcer. And they wouldn't bring me in because they said, this is a flash in the pan. This marathon will never last.
Hmm.
And it became the single largest earner of any special event at Disney in their history. And it still is, as far as I know. So I became the announcer in 95 and have been ever since. And if God is good, God is good. But if I get lucky, it'll be my 30th time in January. Yeah.
So this guy, Don Feinstein, he's
I
a
know that
hasher.
name.
He started the LA did he start the LA Hash House
Okay.
Harriers Club? And it was all trail runners, hard running. Some of the
Oh, yeah.
Hash House Harriers are party clubs, but he was course marshal for 10 miles of the '84 marathon, and he
Oh,
stocked it with hashers. So he
oh,
was up in the air. So he has a Greta Bates signed photo that the Hash loves. It's Greta.
I thought you,
Best wishes to the Hash House Harriers because he went on a chopper ride with her to survey the course for the LA. So guys probably crossed paths out there in LA,
I definitely
and
crossed paths with Greta and
yeah,
her husband because I went over to the to the name some great track meets in what's the one in Oslo?
and
Bislett. Yeah, the Bislett Games. At that point, I was dating a woman from Runner's World magazine who was an editor working for Amby Burfoot. She's now his wife. But anyway, we were living large. Anyway, so we went over and somehow I finagled a press pass through Runner's World because of her. They had a 10K road race. And I think I won the masters of that. But the point was, I went over to Greta's house. We hung out with them and this running club, very similar to the
Hash, yeah.
yeah, Hash House Harriers, very similar to them. So they said, we want you to go run with our friends. They have a club. So I said, okay. This was after that race, by the way, and I went up and we drive way up into the hills and it was a point to point. And they said, we're going to run from here. It's on all these trails and so on. And then eventually we'll end up at a beach and that's where we finish. And so on. I went, great. All I want to do is be good. That feeling where I was 40, probably 44, 45 years old, but I was a good runner. And good is all relative, by the way. But all I want to do is stay up with these guys. I don't want to embarrass myself. And so off we go. Beautiful morning, crisp air, the whole thing. And summer. I think the Bislett Games are like end of June, early July, somewhere in there. And I was a long run, like 8, 10 miles. So running and I'm with this lead group. And as we got close to the beach, it was a smooth beach on this lake. Said we have a tradition. We run as hard as we can across the beach and we dive into the water. And I went, wow, okay, I can swim. That's cool. Summer, it'll be nice. And after that, we go into the bathhouses here, the steam rooms, and we steam. Oh, okay, this is really different, but this is fun. So we get to the beach and I can outkick these guys. So I start kicking and I get in front of them and I run into the water. I dive in and it's got to be 45. I just pop out breathless and they're all standing on the beach. Like, come on, because they knew we were going in the steam house. I was freezing. It was ice cold water. I could have gotten a heart attack. But they said, we really didn't think you'd do it. But I said, dang it, what did you do? And so then and we became fast friends. But Greta, that was her ad hoc running group. And I have a picture of her earlier in our careers at New York. I was determined. It was like 82, 83, somewhere in there. And she was running the race, but I was running the race. And I was coming off the bridge around 16 miles and the crowd erupts. And at that point, I was planning to run definitely under 230, but I had these shoes specially made. I was running for Brooks. The outer soles changed to make them even lighter. It was a disaster. The shoes were falling apart. My feet were bleeding. I was in the top 50 or so for the first 15 miles. But at about mile 16, I'm starting to really hurt. Still running a good pace. And the crowd, I said, wow, I must look pretty good. And off my right shoulder, here comes Greta Weitz passing, setting the world record, by the way, that day. But she's passing me, and I instantly went from elation to I have that became the centerfold picture, by the way, of the New York Roadrunners magazine with all the results. All my friends were calling me a month or so later, saw your picture with Greta. I went, what? Was damned with faint praise, but I have that picture framed. And I said, Greta, I need to have you sign that. And she said, I will, or you can mail it to me and I'll sign it. I said, I'll just wait till you're in Colorado or we'll be at another race. And we never did it. So, yeah, what a wonderful person. And her husband's a wonderful guy. And what a wonderful experience for me. That was just incredible. These things that you get to experience in running. And these things still exist. You just have to take advantage of them. You don't have
No,
to be a world-class athlete to do it.
no, that's magic moments. It's been great talking to you, Creigh. I think we could do this for more hours
Yeah. Yeah.
if
If
we
you ever
dip
come to
connect and
Colorado, let me know. I'll take you out to dinner.
sure.
Stay at the
Yeah,
house.
great. Yeah, we pretty much do. My wife and I are pretty much, we just got back from the Netherlands. We do all of our vacations now with the Hash House Harriers. I started in Kuwait in 1984 before
That's
the
amazing.
war with the Hash House Harriers. So
That's
that's my
amazing.
community of
What a
racers.
great
Yeah.
thing to
I
do.
got back into racing. I did get in shape when I turned 60. I said, well, I'm going to run the Ontario Masters.
Yeah.
And I said, "I wanna get on the podium, so I'll run the steeplechase." I won the 800. No one there are few and far between people willing to jump barriers, so I ran the steeplechase. Moved to
What's the last race you ran?
that was it, 2019. This, must
Yeah.
have been because COVID. My Achilles were pretty bad for a day or 2, and I told my wife, "Don't let me enter anymore."
Yeah, because
I
you know what? I'm gonna run. I was invited by an old friend of mine, Paul Samaras. He is the official tour group leader for the Athens Marathon in Greece. And
Oh,
I've been
yeah.
in 2002 or something. We were the first company to time with timing chips a race in all of Greece, and we did the Athens Marathon. And I was a team leader there a couple of times for the World Road Relay Championships. So I've been to Greece 2 or 3 times, but this guy calls me up. He said, "Would you be our invited guest to come to Athens Marathon?" I said, "I'm an old guy. Geez, come on, man. You get somebody young with a big name." He said, "No, we want you." And so I said, "I'll run the 5K." So that'll be, God willing, my next race.
Wow.
I haven't raced years, but that'll be definitely my next race.
What years? 2002? Did you do 2003 in Athens?
And no, we timed it 1 or 2 years. We timed it. We may have only timed it 1 or 2 years, but I was representing Winning Time out of Italy, and I ran the Winning Time franchise for America. And one of my great stories is that I never paid for any timing equipment ever because I was the beta tester for IPECO, then for Winning Time. And anyway, it's a long story, but we took that timing equipment as carry on luggage and the mats were all rolled up. And back then it was crazy, but you could do this even after 9/11. And we successfully timed it. So I called up the owner in Italy, in Mantua. And I said, they want you to fly down and they want to talk to you about timing races. Maybe the Olympics could be in your purview, but you have to come here. They said, tell them that they can come up and visit me. I said, you're an idiot. You're an absolute idiot. So that was it for me for that. So this will be my first time back.
I may have been there. I may have been there. I can't remember what year. Bunch of Cairo people went over to run the marathon. I stayed with some Athens Hash House Harriers, and I ran the last K.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Well,
They
I didn't
they
run.
had a barefoot they had a barefoot runner.
Oh my
A
God.
member of the Hash ran the Athens Marathon then on that pavement, on that hot pavement.
Oh,
His feet
jeez.
were black, and
Well,
we held our Hash ceremony right outside the stadium.
That's
And the
cool.
race.
We actually it was raining cats and dogs the day that we timed it.
Oh, then we were the next year. It was a
Yeah.
nice
I
day.
think it was
Yeah.
2000. I definitely wasn't 2001, I don't think. But yeah, I mean, so I'm looking forward to that in November.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah,
All
anyway,
right.
this has been a blast, Matthew. Yeah, you're like a legion of people that I know that the moment we sit down, I remember with Shorter and a guy named Dave Hunter, who helped create the Akron Marathon years ago. I used to be there. I helped them create it. And then I was their announcer for years and years. And Dave Hunter would always celebrate one person as an ambassador. And Frank was there one year and he would stay at Frank's house. And it was just like this. Frank and I and Dave would sit there and regale each other with stories, just human stories of our sport. And you're very much of that kindred spirit.
Yeah, I look back and I was told to get off the track and don't run again by 2 doctors who said, "You will
Uh,
not be walking."
that was Dave Hunter. Dave Hunter cannot run anymore yet because of a heart condition, but he otherwise was physically fit.
Yeah, and I've taken 10 years off. I probably didn't do the damage to my heart. I trained pretty hard in my 30s and 40s as running, and there are sand dunes of Cairo. I did 24-hour marathon, just
Oh
all
my God.
amateur stuff. I never ran any real races. I did a triathlon and I did some age group in Israel. I did a triathlon, so I had some fun stuff, but yeah, it was very fun stuff to do. At age 18, I ran a 4:14 mile.
What?
Muggleton took me off the track. So I can relate to those guys, and I knew some of them, and it's still it feels the same. We all in our brains are still that same age.
You ever
We can
dream
go back.
about it? You ever
Oh
have?
my God. How long I have, there are so many nights where I've had dreams of how enjoyable it was. Like all of us, competing was in our blood.
Yeah.
So I was good friends with a lot of people.
Up your
Muggleton was one of this podcast.
wow.
So
That
Muggleton was because he beat Craig Virgin.
yeah, and that was hard to do, man.
Yeah, in the 2 mile indoors. And that's one thing. I mean, Craig.
Yeah.
I don't. How that Olympic boycott affected a friend of mine.
Oh yeah.
Jim Wooding was a decathlete. He made it in '84. He was the AAU national champion in the decathlon in '81, '82. So
Yeah. That
I
Olympic
imagine Craig Virgin's gotta be still bitter.
he had great success, very much like Pat Porter insisted on going back to he made so many Olympic teams, but the 10,000 meters with Coach Joe Vigil, Dr. Vigil told him, if you need to become a marathoner, you're no longer a 10,000-meter guy. And Porter didn't want to do it, and Vigil dropped him. And Vigil was right. There are so many people, but then Anthony Sandoval, Tony was very philosophical about it. He said, at least I got to put my dad on an airplane to Washington, D.C. to meet the president. So it was the first time he'd ever been on a plane. I think how you deal with failure speaks more about you than how you deal with success. And Craig, I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, I don't think. I used to be the event announcer for years and years for the Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta. And I would see him there because he was usually invited guest and so on. I haven't done it now for 8, 10 years, but we would sit and have dinner. And yeah, he's got a pretty substantial ego, but he earned it. And he's a wonderful person. I believe he's still in St. Louis. I'm pretty sure, but he's very reachable. He'd be an interesting guy for you to interview.
Yeah.
He
Yeah, I
taught me.
don't know him at all, so I count on people like Muggleton knows everybody.
Max can get you with Craig.
Yeah,
know?
he certainly can. Even Elder Centrowitz and all these guys.
No, they all could look. We're at an age where Bill Rogers, he's a wonderful interview. He's the most scattered guy ever. He's one of the nicest people ever. And what I was saying, if I had that guest book out, all the people that stayed at my house or been in my house, it would fill volumes and it would be a who's who. Just that I didn't do it, and it's okay.
There's one guy that it'd be great if you could put me in touch with if you feel him out that I cannot track down. A lot of these guys, I've tracked them down.
Oh,
It's a
who is it?
matter of just pinging them. Once a runner.
Oh, John Parker?
I cannot find any contact for information for him
Um,
anywhere.
I haven't talked to him in a century. I would assume he's still living down in the panhandle of Florida, but Jeff Galloway definitely could. Do you know Jeff?
I don't.
First of all, you should interview Jeff.
Yeah,
I
sure.
can, I can connect you with Jeff. Jeff will want to get on your podcast. He's an extraordinary human being, really extraordinary.
I've talked to a few people that hadn't read the Once a Runner book. And
So I just am sending you Jeff Galloway's contact info and his daughter-in-law, Carissa Galloway, who's married to Jeff's son.
oh, yeah,
Carissa claims I'm one of her mentors in announcing
nice.
last 18 years, but she is one of the top women announcers in the country now. She,
Oh,
by
well, I'll get her on. Yeah.
yeah, you should definitely get her on because she's fascinating and I love her to death. She's like a daughter.
It might be easier through her too. She may, if I
Yeah,
can.
really close to death, and which was weird because he's the archetypical fitness guy. But she can definitely get you to Jeff. If Jeff doesn't answer the phone, fine. Or if one of the numbers I gave you doesn't work. I've talked to Jeff for the last year, certainly saw him at Disney. And then but Carissa, their family. Yeah, I think you should.
And I'll do this forever. I actually started doing Hash House Harriers because it's an organization that really expanded out of Kuala Lumpur for the first time in 1960s. There's a few good runners who are Hash House Harriers,
I'm sure.
dedicated. There's one guy who was great, Frank Gurman, 1965. He and his twin brother ran behind the Iron Curtain in a dual meet in Ukraine.
Oh.
I got the video. There's a Jim McKay, the first track, and that I'll send you. You'll like to hear this. It's Jim McKay announcing the 800
He
meters.
spoke at our high school track banquet.
Wow. Gurman won against the two. But the funny story about that he tells is when he got there, they told him, "Oh, the bus isn't ready." They made him sit at the airport for 2 hours. Then they drove him around in circles. Then they said the elevator's done. They had to walk up. He said the Russian government just abused them. He said the runners were fine.
Harry Groves, who became the coach at Pennsylvania,
He was Penn State.
Penn State.
Yeah.
So Harry Groves, this is a true story. We go to a cross country meet at William and Mary, VMI, across the other side of the state. We get there the day before and we didn't fly, drove long. It had to be 6-hour drive. We get there, we're tired. And Coach Groves comes up to us and says, "Would you like to see the course?" Sure. We didn't know what he meant. He walked the entire 5-mile course. It was 5 miles with cross country back then. We walked this hilly course with him. He did it maliciously.
Yeah.
We were all wiped out from that walk. Run it'd be easy, but walking it. So the next day we ran and they beat us, but still we did okay. But so years later at the USA Track and Field Convention, he's now a luminary in track and field as an Olympic coach and everything else. But I also had stature, and this had to be in the 90s. And I see Harry, and I said, "Harry, you remember me?" He goes, "How would I ever know you?" I said, "I ran for VMI. And in 1967, we came to run a meet with you or one of those years, 65, 67. And you made us walk the course the day before. After the fact, we realized what you had done." And he just said, smile. I said, "It's important to win." But he was a great guy. I don't know if he's still living, what he's doing.
He died within the last 2 or 3 years.
He is
And
a great guy.
they did COVID, I think, I talked to one of his runners from the '70s from my neck of Pennsylvania, Dave Felice. He said they didn't quite have the memorial on his life that they wanted to because of COVID.
That's a shame. That's a tragic thing. Great talking to you, Matthew, and it's fun. And if you have any trouble getting hold of Jeff, let me know. He can also get you with John Parker too.
Yeah, that's good.
I know that
Yeah,
they're.
the other book, Purple Runner. Have you heard of this one?
Oh yeah, Paul Chrisman. Yeah, we
Yeah,
inducted him into our Colorado Running Hall of Fame 2 or 3 years ago, and
yeah.
he had the best newsletter back when it was mailed. What was it called? It was called the. What was it called? Anyway, it was.
Really basic name. Yeah,
You probably it's in that book. It'll tell you what it is.
yeah,
Running stats or
yeah.
racing stats, one of the two. I think it was running stats, but it was great. You couldn't wait to get that. It was a weekly. You couldn't wait to get it. I mean, it was like that and road race management, that newsletter that Phil put out. Now it's all electronic, but for years and years it was printed, and you waited for those publications to come out. That track and field news, running times, and Runner's World was a very different magazine back then, and I really liked it. I still get it. There's an issue right here, but it's not nearly. It's all anyway different.
Yeah, so at some point, I'd like to talk to Paul.
Paul is. Let me see if he's in my contacts because he should be. Let me see. Paul. Oh wait, I spelled it wrong. No wonder. Paul. I'm going to send you John Tope, Tope. He's of our generation. Was a good runner. I think he ran 2:35 or 6 in the marathon back in the day. He came from a completely different slice of life. You'd love him. He was in the rock and roll era. He was a runner. He worked for a record label out of Atlanta. So he worked at concerts with the Rolling Stones and everybody else. Plus, for years and years, he was part of the elite athlete management for the Boston Marathon and for the New York Marathon. He may still
Wow.
be involved with New York. He still is involved with Bix, 7 miler. He's a guy you should interview. He's got stories. He can tell you about riding around with John Belushi in the middle of the night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, people would love to hear that. Yeah.
Let me
Do you
just.
know more? Do you know Marcy Schwamm? Does that name ring a bell?
Mm.
She was a ultra runner, but she said she was like with Fred LeBeau the day before. So I just didn't.
Oh, I'm sending you John Tope. He would
Okay.
be so much fun to
Nice.
interview because
I,
he
I
knows
ju-
everything.
yeah. There's a couple other names. I'm just curious. There's hashers that I know that are bit. Bill Scholl, does that name right?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
He's a longtime hasher. He held the Philly marathon record till about 3-4 years ago.
Wow.
Long record. He
Yeah.
went to Malone and they won the NAIA national championship as a team around 72.
Oh, wow. Another guy
They're
that's
ki
really a great, interesting guy is Mark Kerr, who set the world record in the half marathon at Philly a long time ago, early 80s, I think, maybe mid 80s. But now the guys are all running 58 minutes. But
Yeah.
back then, he was running 1 hour. He's just an extraordinary athlete. Anyway, I sent you John Tope's contact information. John Tope can put you in touch with Paul Chrisman because he's my guy that runs the selection committee every year for the Colorado Running Hall of Fame. But in his own right, he wasn't a world-class runner, but he did amazing things. Knew that whole record world back then was just the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He can tell you stories. And he
Great.
drank, he never smoked. He's that guy. All those guys.
I just keep liking to ask you just one more. There's a hasher who runs a timing company now, but he was a race director for the bridge run in Charleston.
Oh, yeah.
His name's Chuck Magera.
I know the name for sure.
Yeah, he's just big into hash hustler, but he's now running a timing company, and he times stuff all over the country now. He has a little company, but he was a 408 miler at Miami of Ohio in the 70s. He looks like Ron Jeremy, the porn star, and his belly's out to here. But they're just same stuff. I interviewed him. He'll love hearing your story, and because you've been in it from every angle that there is on the sport. You really,
As far as I know, I don't know that I left any stones unturned, but I'm still learning.
Yeah.
And being a race director and learning about safety and security and writing emergency action plans, if you'd asked me 20 years ago if I'd ever be doing anything remotely like that, I would have said, "Are you insane?" Maybe 23 years ago. Would I ever do anything like that? That would be ridiculous. Why would have you ever talked to Dave McGilvery?
No.
He's the race director for Boston for 3 decades.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
He's another guy that if you get him.
I think, yeah, the one guy that I went to college with who couldn't even I went to little college, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, and this guy couldn't even make the C team. He ran Boston under 3 hours in 5 decades.
Holy mackerel.
He ran 8 miles a day. I talked to him. He's 68, Kerry Green. I just love this idea of you and this generation. The history of the country is told in your side stories.
Yeah, and it's funny, again, you think about my generation, your generation too, but where it was all about anti-war. And here I was going to a military
Yeah.
and I was spit on in Grand Central Station when I was in uniform as a lieutenant on the way back from Vietnam. Now everybody says, "Thank you for your service." They say it to all the, and nobody thanked us. And now when they do, it's almost embarrassing. I said, that's
Right.
way too late. But,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't trade. Thankfully, I didn't get wounded and thankfully I'm still alive, but I wouldn't trade living through this period of time with anybody. It was revolutionary time for our country. We're still going through change. We're a highly divided country. It's somewhat tragic to see it, but we were a highly divided country we were a highly divided country in the 40s after Second World War. It's the nature of the beast. There's going to be conflict and conflict resolution. And most people will say, my parents said, country's going to hell in a handbasket for me. It's ruined. They ruined this great country.
Yeah. When I was in my just entering my mid-20s, I went overseas to Kuwait on my own.
Yeah.
The guys I hung out with were these Vietnam vets who were
Wow.
traumatized. I was there wasn't anybody else except for school teachers. There wasn't anybody else 25 years old. So I coached basketball. I played basketball,
Wow.
but I would hang out on the weekends and play cards with these former Marines,
Yeah.
former Army guys that had now their wives had all said, "What do you go somewhere? You're
Yeah.
supposed to be here 30 days a year. What are you doing home?" So they all lived in Kuwait, sent their money home, and were just damaged,
And
went through stuff.
yeah, everybody processes war differently. And I think God gave me somehow the ability to move beyond that very quickly. There were times when I would wake up in the middle of the night shocked, or it was not unusual to find myself falling onto the floor with
Uh,
noise.
I spent 6 weeks in the green zone working for USAID in
Okay.
Baghdad,
Then
and it was 6 weeks, and I've worked around military, I've been on aircraft carriers doing medical studies and things, but I hit the ground a couple times from lawnmowers, so I can't imagine what
yeah,
there were mortar shells in Baghdad still going, but that's just a tiny sliver. Yeah.
yeah, but everybody processes differently. So when people start talking about PTSD, honestly, there were a lot of us that said, I'm going to call BS. But then you get older, you get wiser, and you realize that this was the same for every war. And there's a great anti-war novel from the First World War called Johnny Got His Gun. And you read that, you understand. You understand a lot. But when you're young and you feel you're invincible, that you're not vulnerable, and you've been trained. I was trained for 4 years. We knew that was coming. And so it wasn't any great burden emotionally for us. But even some of my classmates came out of it very changed. I certainly grew up in that one year. I friggin' grew up big time. Changed my whole attitude about loving life and being appreciative. Yeah.
Mhm. There's a do you ever hear the name Larry Coy?
Very coy.
He's a Ohio runner. He became a Navy pilot. There's a lot of these episodes, but as a military guy. You might enjoy his
Did you interview
episode.
him?
I did. I don't know if I published it yet, but I'll let you know. Yeah, Larry Coy, they call him his name's Splash. He told the story of
There's a reason. I can immediately
yeah,
think of the reason. Yeah.
yeah. He was a very good runner. He stayed in Division III because of a high school sweetheart. He might have become something. He was many time All-American Division III. Very good runner. By the time he joined and wanted to be a fighter pilot, he joined at 27. He
Wow.
was laughing at the at the physical exam. Nobody could. He was still a 4:15 miler when he was 27.
Yeah.
You
When
know?
when you're in that kind of level of shape, it's like I said, one of the greatest things that track and field and cross country gave me was that level of fitness when I went to Vietnam. Even though I'd been smoking
Oh
for a
yeah.
few months, that level of fitness was just at a very high level. My great regret, and I always said would have, should have, could have. We're all part of that club. But had I ever been coached correctly, I remember I ran in Florida relays in the distance medley and I ran the 3/4. And yeah, I was a 3 miler and steepler, but coach put me in the 3/4. I ran 3:06. And I said that was the day I would have run at least 4:10, if not
Yeah.
4:12. But I
Yeah.
never ran faster than 4:21 in my whole career because
Yeah.
I didn't train for the mile. I trained, I don't know what kind of training I was doing.
All that stuff was an exciting time. We had no idea what was going on.
That's
Yeah,
so
it was
cool.
different.
Oh, that's cool. You know what? No regrets. My 3 children are incredibly successful. I mean, beyond, to the point where I said, "I really want you to come to the house because I need you to." My daughter works for Ford, as I said, and she's up in lives in Grosse Pointe, and my son runs a big company in Chicago, and my daughter's vice president of a big company out of Chicago and lives here. And I said, "I want you to come by the house next time and pick out the things that you want because I plan to sell the house next summer." And they said, "Dad, I think we're good." Yes. We'll do the old silver just for old time's sake, but yeah, I think we're good.
That's great. You've got a great future with your wedding in Kenya. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. It's
Hey,
going to
I'm
be
telling you,
great.
Matthew, you and your wife, you're welcome to come over. Yeah, great stuff. But anyway, you're most welcome.
That's great. Thanks for all your time. Talk to you
Great to
later,
meet you
Creigh.
too, by the way. Great to meet you.
All right.
All right,
Thank
buddy.
you very much.
Later.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.